what was so interesting about this book is it's the first time that I've written so many villains from their point of view. Whenever I write a book, I write from the perspective of imperfect people. I'm not interested in perfect characters. I like messy kind of characters, but this is the first time that I've written from the perspective of so many villains. And it was really interesting to me to get into their point of view and to say, no villain is the villain in their own story. They view themselves as the hero of their own story, and they view other people as the villains. So it was really interesting to get into each of their heads and to go, okay, you're not a very nice person. What made you like this? Why are you like this? What is it that you want that's making you act in these terrible ways? And that was a lot of fun.
This is Story to Count with Jen Jumba. In conversations with writers, something magical happens, and as readers, we begin to see them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. My hope is through these conversations, you learn about their craft, them as a person, you'll become like me, fiercely loyal, want to read their current book, entire backlist, any future book, or any book they've blurbed. And when you see their name, you'll want to support them, not only as incredible storytellers, but also the thoughtful individuals you have come to know. So I'm super excited because my guest today is Bianca Marais. She's the author of Hum If You Don't Know the Words, If You Want to Make God Laugh, The Witches of Moonshine Manor, and her latest, A Most Puzzling Murder. As a matter of fact, I think A Most Puzzling Murder will turn 1 next week. June 10th.
Yes.
So happy first birthday. Bianca
Thank
is a
you.
USA Today best-selling author. She holds a certificate in creative writing from the University of Toronto's School of Continuing Studies and is also an award-winning creative writing instructor there. Before turning to writing, she started a corporate training company and volunteered with Cotlands, where she assisted care workers in Soweto with providing aid for HIV/AIDS orphans. Bianca is also the founder and co-host of the famous podcast, The Shit No One Tells You About Writing, which is a podcast for emerging writers who are looking to improve their work with an aim of having it published, or for anyone who would like a behind-the-scenes look at the publishing industry. Bianca is originally from South Africa, now resides in Toronto with her husband. I was really fortunate. 2 years ago, I met Bianca when friends of ours that we had in common were celebrating a simultaneous book launch. And Bianca was the one who helped me navigate the Toronto subway back to the hotel where I was staying. During the ride, we had a great conversation. I actually wished for traffic so I could spend more time listening to her talk about her writing and learning from her. And the kind soul that she is, she walked me back to my hotel, despite me knowing where I was headed, just to make sure I got there safe and sound. Once I was back in my room, I immediately ordered her books and binge read them. I think I sent some fangirl messages about these beautiful stories, and I wrote how she cracked my heart wide open with these characters and the journeys they experienced. And as a gifted writer, Bianca made me feel like I was right there with them. You know, the characters that live in your heart long after you turn the last page? Those are the characters that she writes, and I've been a fan of hers ever since. A Most Puzzling Murder is Bianca's most recent book. It is absolutely brilliant, and you'll learn why in just a minute. So thank you.
Jen, what an amazing introduction. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I mean, besides those crazy boys that were on the subway, we kept trying to escape.
It made Toronto sound dangerous. Toronto is not dangerous.
It is not dangerous.
We got on the train with some overly zealous young whippersnappers who had a lot of beer, and it was an interesting journey.
It was, but it was certainly enjoyable. So this book, A Most Puzzling Murder, will you introduce listeners to it?
Yes. So this book is a genre blend, which is very interesting. So it's part closed room murder mystery. It's part fantasy. There are choose your own adventure chapters that consist of philosophical thought experiments. There are puzzles interspersed throughout the book that the reader can solve alongside the main character. And if you get stuck and you need clues, you can email the main character and she emails you back. So we begin with our main character, Destiny Whip. She's in her early 20s, was a child prodigy who became an enigmatologist at a very young age. So that's someone who solves mysteries. And we begin with her, and we know that there is grief that she is dealing with. In the opening chapter, she is clutching an emotional support urn because she cannot have an emotional support animal. And she gets this mysterious invitation to Erie Island. And because she is trying to figure out where she comes from and who her parents are, she goes off to this island to seek answers. And there she encounters a diabolical, magical royal family where everybody is cutthroat, everybody's stabbing each other's back because they want dominance, and poor Destiny is thrown into the middle of all of this.
So well said, because I kept trying to write a description of it, and it's so nuanced and so many different layers. And you talked about choose your own adventures, and I'm of the age where I read all those as kids. But yours, I think, are called choose your own conundrums. But they are certainly things
Yes.
that make you think. And I'm thinking, well, if I do this, what will happen, right? And if I do this, what will happen? And it's that whole part of life that's just clearly uncertain. And anytime we make a decision that removes another option and then leads to a series of events.
Yeah, very much so, because this book tackles a lot of things like unintended consequences, because in life you can have the best intentions, you can go about and make decisions really thinking you've really thought them through. And often things will go completely south because something unintended will happen. And I really wanted to write a book, one that the reader could live inside of, because I had that nostalgia for when I was a child. I remember reading books and just wanting to climb into the book and become the main character and live in this world and be their best friend. And so I wanted to combine that, but as well with critical thinking skills, because I feel like due to AI, due to social media, reels and memes, we are losing all of our critical thinking skills. And so I wanted this book to be wildly entertaining, but I also wanted it to challenge the reader at the same time.
I think you did a wonderful job of blending and proving that those two things aren't mutually exclusive, that you can be entertained and engaged in a story and at the same time using your brain, critically thinking. You have puzzles throughout the book and not the same puzzle. I mean, there's crossword puzzles, there's ciphers, there's all kinds of things. Obviously, you must be somebody who enjoys puzzles.
Yeah, I love puzzles. I start off every day doing the pangram, the wordle, the pips, etc. That like wakes me up for the day.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to do quite a bit of research for this book on the different kinds of puzzles because I wanted to make sure that they would appeal to different kinds of brains and to different kinds of thinking. So there's people who are really good at math. There's people who are good at word puzzles. There's people who are good at logic. And so I tried to sort of cover the whole spectrum of them so that if a reader goes, oh man, I'm not good at math, they can just turn to the back, get the answer and move on. But then I was hoping that there would at least be like one or two puzzles in the book that they would be like, okay, this is my jam. I'm gonna do this. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there were moments where I got it easily and quickly, and I was like, look at me. And then I'd get to the next one. I was like, oh, this is not my wheelhouse. And my brain.
Which ones were your wheelhouse and which ones did you struggle with?
I struggled with the one that was like how many blocks have to be shaded.
The nonogram. Yes. That was very interesting.
I thought this is it. And I tried so hard, and I'm like, you can do this. And I even like set it down and I walked away for like 15 minutes and then I came back to it because sometimes you just need to change the scenery. And I was like, darn it, she still has me. So then I emailed Destiny Whip and she gives me a hint back. But I can't imagine the amount of research. Did you discover puzzles that all of a sudden you didn't realize you loved so much that are now your jam?
Well, this one that you're talking about, the nonogram, I'd never heard of that before. So that came up in my research, but I suck at it as well. I cannot do it because it's kind of like math and deductive reasoning together. And
it's like Sudoku, and I can't do that either.
Yeah, I can only do the easy Sudokus, and it takes me a long time to do them.
Right.
But the word puzzles and stuff, that's more my jam.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I had my husband help me with a lot of these puzzles because I'm not a math person. So he did a lot of the math puzzles and the deductive reasoning. And in Toronto, we belong to a group that does closed room murder mysteries. Like we do escape room games, right?
Right.
So you get locked in this room and you've got to escape and you've got to solve puzzles and stuff. So my love of puzzles like comes together in all of that. I wanted to make this like a escape room game, but like for readers.
Well, it is so ridiculously entertaining and just stumps the brain a bit, but not in a way that is frustrating or makes you want to quit. You just want to keep going with it. And thanks to your husband, if he did the math, I forgot the properties of where the parentheses go when you're multiplying something and you have to multiply before you add. Because I had a completely different number and then I looked at it and I was like, yes. So that was quite
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Very quite fun. And then like
That's
the
thanks to him. I
symbols.
couldn't have done the math once.
Yeah, no, I mean, this was ridiculously good, but to go back a little bit to your point, I mean, yes, there are puzzles involved and there are choose your own conundrums involved, but the unintended consequences is a theme that runs throughout. And you chose to tell this book from multiple perspectives, different characters' points of view, which I always, as a reader, enjoy because I feel like everybody's experiencing something very similar, but we all have different perspectives or experiences on what we think is happening or why it's happening. Can you talk a little bit about telling everything from different characters' point of view?
Yeah. So, you know what? My first book, I told it from 2 points of view. My
Mhm,
second book, I told it from 3 points of view. My
mhm.
third book, I think it was 7 or 8 points of view. And then this, my fourth book, I think we've got like 15 points of view if you include the choose your own conundrum chapters. It was
Yes.
a little bit insane, but I wanted to show, we've got this character Destiny who is only privy to so much information. She comes in and different things get revealed to her, but other characters know things that she doesn't know. And people are lying and people are keeping things from each other and they're keeping things from her.
Right.
And what was so interesting about this book is it's the first time that I've written so many villains from their point of view. Whenever I write a book, I write from the perspective of imperfect people.
Mhm.
I'm not interested in perfect characters. I like messy kind of characters, but this is the first time that I've written from the perspective of so many villains. And it was really interesting to me to get into their point of view and to say, no villain is the villain in their own story. They view themselves as the hero of their own story and they view other people as the villains. So it was really interesting to get into each of their heads and to go, okay, you're not a very nice person. What made you like this? Why are you like this? What is it that you want that's making you act in these terrible ways? And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is we will all justify our actions because they all make sense to us. I mean, there's even a point where Darius, who's talking about how he is, like, never really says much to others, kind of has a wall up because he believes that there's a person everybody sees perfectly wrapped in appealing and charming packaging and the shadow self he keeps hidden because he believes that people then, if you tell them stuff, will then use that as ammunition against you. Like he doesn't trust a soul. Which is really
No.
kinda
And
sad. I
this
think we all need people in our lives that we can trust.
very much so. But again, if you look at why he's like that, a lot of that
Mhm.
comes from his childhood. His
Right.
father's an awful person. His father's treated
He's
him
the worst.
badly. Yeah. Yeah. Mordecai Scruffmore is the absolute worst. He's a terrible villain. But anyone who wants to write or who studies storycraft, there's a book by Lisa Cron called Story Genius, and in it she discusses a character's misbelief. She says that every character has some kind of misbelief that goes back to their childhood that they carry throughout their life, whether it's believing that they are not lovable, whether it's believing that, other people don't like them or that they can't share who they are with people because then that gets used against them. That is something that informs a lot of a character's insecurities and who they are going forward. So with each of these characters, it was like, okay, what is the misbelief? Where did it come from? And how does this reflect in them as adults who are still struggling with that childhood trauma?
Yeah, and as a result of that, you put all of them in this castle, this essentially big locked room, and those tensions are just exacerbated based on their own narrative that they're telling themselves, their own misbelief of how they're perceived. So, so well done.
Yeah.
So well done.
And the nice thing as well with so many different points of views is that the reader doesn't just have access to each character in that point of view. Characters view each other the whole time, and characters will comment on another character's behavior. So each character is pretty much an unreliable narrator but
Mm-hmm.
you get to see them through each other's eyes as well, through their suspicions, etc. So it's like, it's really fun to play with that kind of ensemble cast.
I can only imagine, and you're the writer that creates it. So I have to imagine, and I know writing is a very solitary pursuit, but I have to imagine it was fun writing. I know it was difficult without a doubt, just because it is so complex, but I'm hoping that you had fun writing it as well.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with these characters. Some of them are lovely, some of them are awful. The thing with me, Jen, is that, and I think you and I have discussed this before, is that I don't plot anything. So some writers are plotters, others are pantsers, which means we fly by the seat of our pants. I pants everything, because if I know what's going to happen, I have no desire to write the book, which is fine when you're writing, historical fiction, book club fiction. Very, very difficult when you're writing a closed room murder mystery and you begin and you don't know who gets murdered, why they get murdered, how they get murdered, etc. And you've just got to trust the process and be like, okay, this is going to all sort itself out by the end.
I mean, if you're not a plotter and you don't like do a detailed outline, how do you kind of keep track of all of that? I mean, I know your brain is magnificent. I'm not denying that, but I mean, at some point, do you put Post-its? Do you put like a
It's
note in where you're writing to say like, need to come back to this? It's amazing.
so with this, in the beginning, I was like, I'm going to give myself a main character who I love, who's fully formed, and I'm just going to follow her and see where she takes me. And she notices everything. She's a character who's very observant, who
Hmm.
has excellent deductive reasoning. And so she would look at things and I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. Why is she looking at this? And then I'd pay attention to that. And so the story evolved like that. But at some point, halfway through the book, I had to reverse engineer it. So I had to come up with a huge spreadsheet that was like chapter 1, what Destiny knows, what she doesn't know, what this character knows, what they're not telling her, what this character knows, but is telling this character, but is lying about it. So it was a really difficult document. And I had post-it notes all over my office as I was going, okay, this character knows this, but they haven't disclosed it yet, which means Destiny can't know it yet. I call it like juggling with Jello. It was really, really tough at some spots.
Yeah, it is ambitious, and you pulled it off brilliantly. Destiny, is one of my favorite characters. I love her best friend Bex, who provides lovely commentary throughout, which is terrific. And throughout this book, yes, there are puzzles. The other thing you did that is incredible is a world building. You created Erie Island to create this entire world and entire spells and castings, and like that's a whole other level.
Yeah. The world building is tough because you have to make sure that the magical laws make sense, right? You can't just be like, okay, it's magical and so everything goes. You have to make sure that the magic is limited in some ways, that they can't just, conjure things that would be too easy. And so I do world building as I'm going along. I'll get to a certain point and I'm like, okay, how does the magic work here? What kind of magical power does this particular character have that others may not have? We get told that magic is something that needs to be practiced. And Darius, his whole life has not really been interested in the diligence or the dedication it takes to learn magic. And so his skills weren't as advanced as other people's skills, for example. And we know that his sister, Evangeline, she feels very guilty about using her magic because she's always thinking of the repercussions. And so she isn't someone who will just use her magic. She'll only use it as a last resort. Whereas we've got the twins, Minx and Angel, who are just awful, and they use magic in the real world to smite their own fans. So yeah, it was the world building you've really got to pay attention to make sure that everything goes together and makes sense.
You do a wonderful job of capturing the essence of characters in the descriptions when you're talking about Minx and Angel, the twins. That Angel's more of this wholesome surfer girl next door kind of thing, and Minx is like this cross between an anime villain and a bad biker chick. It's spot on. Like everybody knows exactly how to conjure that in their mind in just those few words. and you were talking about the rules of magic. I mean, I have like a whole page of notes because as things are being revealed to me about how magic works, I'm taking notes because I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. This might come in handy, right? Like magical royalty can only rule when their powers are strong, how they need the sigil and the medallion to come together. I mean, I'm taking notes. I'm like, this is going to all help me,
Yeah, and this book, for a lot of readers have said to me, oh my God, you're stressing me out because the book says, please write in me. If you rubbing like pencil to paper, I am purring with happiness. And so many people are like, I can't write in my books. I can't write in my books. Why are you making me do this?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like throughout, I think there's been a handful of people who got like the sigils reveal, because like at the top of every chapter there is a shape.
Yes.
And there is a whole medallion, that's the family's kind of crest. And you have to be paying very careful attention throughout to pick up on each of the clues to be able to put it together at the end.
Yeah, it is great. I did write in the book for one of the puzzles. And, as a librarian, it's like, oh my gosh, we don't write in books. And this is why I think I showed you, like, I have flags in the book, but the flags are really cool because they underline the line. So I don't actually have to highlight the book.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, what do I care? This is like my book I can do. And this is like the signed one from you, which is even more special. But yeah, very, very beginning about go ahead, right? I think what you said, purring with contentment, I think.
Appreciation.
Appreciation. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I did for the library books and for the e-readers is that there is like a downloadable worksheet on my website. So for people who are, reading it at the library and can't be writing in library books, I do have the worksheet. But it has been amazing to see people bring their copies to be signed, and the book is completely marked up, which makes me so happy.
As it should. I mean, I started listening to the audio and I was like, wait a second, I can't do this. Yes, I can download the sheets or like pull out my book and read it in real time, but I was trying to do both, read and listen, because it's just such a great story, as well as this whole puzzle solving, mystery solving. You can put everything that can happen in a mystery kind of together in one spot. So very, very cool.
I didn't think about the audio when I was writing it, and that was an oversight on my part, because people read audios while they're walking, while they're driving, while they're doing laundry. And so they can't stop and look at the visual puzzles all the time, which the whole book is about, these visual puzzles. And so I had to rewrite parts of the audiobook so that it's different to the actual book, because people wouldn't have access to those visual clues. So yeah, it's not a book I would recommend listening to on audiobook unless you have no other option. It is definitely one that works so much better with a physical copy.
But it's nice to be able to do both. Like I find myself often having an audiobook and the physical book to read at the same time, because reading an actual book while driving, I've learned, is dangerous. So safety first.
Don't do that. We say
safety
no.
First.
The
other thing that's great in this book, the characters are great. The world building is great. The storyline of, who killed, who and why, when there's only like a limited number, and to keep us constantly guessing is great. But the other thing that you do so well in this book is the humor and the snark, if I can say, just brilliantly delivered lines. Evangeline and Newton. Newton is the second wife, the mother of the twins, not exactly the smartest, and she's disparaging to Evangeline about fashion and dress. And Evangeline is like talking about being smart and then saying, oh, I'm sure that we can find one topic you'll be able to understand. And it's just, your characters are saying stuff I think that we've all thought at one point or another, which is quite fun. Destiny's first impression of the island. It's as though its architect and decorator were handed a brief to design a room that would make an unsuspecting guest rear back in alarm and send them scuttling back outside.
I think I described it as the Disney castle, except if the villain lived there, as opposed to the princess.
Yeah, it is quite fun. I think probably my ultimate favorite line, because I think we all need people to say this to us every once in a while. So now I will have to channel Bex's message. When Bex says to Destiny, I know this is tough, but you need to take 2 teaspoons of cement and harden the fuck up, Buttercup, because if you're right and nasty resting bitch face needs your help, you're failing her right now. I just think, wow, like
That
the
is,
next time I'm feeling a little anxious, I'm going to take 2 teaspoons of cement and harden up.
it's not always the best advice. It's my husband's favorite saying. He's always like, take two teaspoons of cement and harden the fuck up. And so I stole it from him. And Bex is also like, she's the tough love character, right? She's just like, I know this is hard for you, but like, you need to get your shit together, etc. And it's also nice to show that, you can have friends who are your cheerleaders and who cheering you on, but there's also people who are like, okay, this is enough now, get your shit together.
Right, because she's lost a lot, kind of a little bit in her defense. It's been a year, but she's gone through a series of loss and grief. And so she gets this letter and this chance to this possibly might be family that she doesn't know she has, and that desperate cling to that because she's lost so much is really interesting to play out.
Yeah, you know what? A story needs to have high stakes. It's not enough to build a really great character. You need a character that readers want to cheer on and cheer for, but you also need conflict. You need high stakes in a story. And for somebody who's, never known where they've come from and their mother, something terrible happened to her and something terrible happened to other people in her life, what she desperately needs and wants is connection. And so she wants family. And so she's prepared to go through a lot to get those answers, which means we begin with those kind of high stakes for her.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think all of us kind of want that sense of family and that sense of connection. And she's no different except for the fact that she also happens to have some gifts that she's not quite sure about. Are
Yeah.
we allowed to talk? I mean, I know we're not giving spoilers, so sometimes why it's hard to do this
No,
without
no,
giving
we
things
can
away.
get sort of, yeah, I think it's maybe even on the flap copy. But yeah, she has not grown up around magical people that she knows of. And so she's had these prophetic sort of dreams and she sleep writes. So I am someone who sleepwalks a lot.
Really?
And so, yes, I am a terrible sleepwalker. In fact, my husband and I were on a cruise in October for his 50th birthday. We were with a bunch of friends on the cruise ship and there was a knock on the door at 3:00 in the morning and some cruise passengers were returning me to my room. I was in my pajamas. My poor husband had to open the door and like have his wife delivered to him. I have no idea where I was going. The next morning I woke up and there was like a chair pushed against the door and all of our luggage against it. And I was like, what's going on? And he was like, you don't remember that you went walking last night? I was like, nope. So, I was channeling that. So Destiny writes messages to herself because her brain is so overworked during the day and her brain doesn't stop at night. So she's, she writes all these messages to herself as well. So yeah, that was also something I managed to have a bit of fun with.
Yeah, just the fact that you can see things, and this you allude to in the book when we talk about unintended consequences, and the fact that she can see things. So if it's prophetic, like wanting to be able to intervene to stop the things from happening, and those are some of the questions that you pose when we're doing the choose your own conundrum, to really think, like, just because you know something, should you intervene, or is it happening the way
Right.
that it's supposed to? They're big philosophical questions, and I still don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, the thing is that there is no right answer. And that one came from, philosopher Philippa Foot. She did something called the trolley experiment. And so I really, wanted readers to struggle with it and grapple with it and go, okay, I really think that this is the right answer. And then boom, there's unintended consequences. Or I think this is the right answer. And then there's these unintended consequences. So I think if you are somebody who can see the future, I think it must be terrible because, awful things that are going to happen. But if you can't, I mean, it's still murky, no vision comes with this is the day, this is the time, this is the place that it's going to happen. So she needs to interpret it and try and do her best to prevent bad things from happening, which isn't always possible. But then there's that guilt, that constant guilt you're living with because you weren't able to prevent things from happening.
Right. And even if you did intervene and stop something bad from happening, it's not enough to overshadow. And I think that's just humans, right? Sometimes it's easier to believe the bad than the good at times.
Yeah.
It's not enough to
Yeah.
overshadow, like, well, I saved all of this, but this was the one that I couldn't intervene with. So
Yeah.
the other theme that comes up in this book, which makes me really happy to see, is learning to trust your own voice. Destiny, about trusting her inner voice, gives her the courage to speak up about believing she has a part to play here. I mean, these are essentially strangers that she's come in contact with under some really tense circumstances. I mean, somebody's dead and they're all kind of in this castle and trying to figure out, like, can she tell them that this is what she's able to do? And
Yeah.
for them to
Yeah.
trust that she's coming at it from a good place of wanting to help and not wanting to stir the pot like some of the other villains in the story.
Yeah. You know what? It's such a thing in life is to trust yourself, to trust that inner voice, to trust your instincts. And then it's a completely different thing to trust other people, right? And especially if sometimes you've trusted the wrong people, it makes you go, okay, people are not trustworthy, but maybe you just trusted the wrong person with something at that time. And so that's a big part of her character arc, because it's so important in storytelling that who the character is at the end of the story is so different to who they were at the beginning, because they have to go on a journey that's like a baptism of fire, and they need to learn and grow so that at the end they've learned something from what they've been through. And so Destiny's story arc, character arc, was really satisfying to have us at the, have her grow into herself, grow into her powers, trust her voice, trust herself. That was, very satisfying.
Without a doubt, especially because early on we meet her and she's like lying in bed, like doesn't want to leave the house, hasn't left her house, in about a year. And so, like, heck, a win would just be for her to leave the house. So when she accepts the invitation, figures out how to get there, there's this part like, okay. And then to see that continued arc, I think is terrific. It's the people that don't have an arc, that are still the same people at the end of a life experience that they were, like, the same people that they were at the beginning. Like, did you not learn from that? Did you not grow? Did you not gain any lesson, wisdom, something? So I guess not everybody has the
Yeah. And
capacity to
and in
grow.
this book there totally. And in this book there are characters who stay completely constant. You don't see any change because they're not prepared to, view themselves in a way that allows for self-growth or self-improvement. And also, besides Destiny needing family, it was very important to me to write a plus-size character. So I'm someone who has struggled with my weight my entire life, had eating disordered behavior when I was younger, and whose sense of worth has so often been tied to my size. And I also wanted to show, that it's fine to take up space in the world. Destiny doesn't lose weight. She doesn't change physically at all, but she's on an island with a bunch of these really superficial people who only care about how people look. And so they say nasty things about her weight. And so she really feels like a fish out of water. She calls herself a pelican in a flamboyance of flamingos. She feels like completely out of her depth as well. So it's like this personal thing as well, because I don't know about you, Jen, but there's been so many times in my life when I've stepped into a room and felt so insecure about myself and, how I look or whatever. And you get so much in your head that you struggle to like just be yourself with people, etc. And so I wanted to show that kind of internal struggle as well on the one hand, but on the other hand, her brain is incredible. I mean, she was a child genius, child prodigy. Her brain is so whip smart, but she feels like the brain has been packaged in unattractive packaging. And so that's something that she also needs to, overcome as well.
I think it's incredible that you wrote that from that perspective. I'm sorry that you walked into a room like that. I would never expect that. When I met you, you were like
Ah,
just this incredibly
no.
kind soul. I mean, who else is going to walk the streets of Toronto completely out of their way to make sure I get back to the hotel? Just a kindness as I, navigated back from dinner. But I think everybody reconciles with that. I think everybody at one time or another, some of us more often than others, will feel like that. Going into a room like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
don't know these people. I'm not comfortable in what I wear. I don't know that I look okay. And, most of the time people are doing that themselves are not really worried about what you're doing,
Exactly.
because
Exactly.
they've got their
Everybody's
own little.
feeling like that. And yeah,
Right.
so that is so true.
Yeah, what I've learned is that somebody just has to take the first step, say the first thing, and then once you start talking to somebody, you realize they're great. Like, you realize, Destiny is whip smart. I mean, even when she's making asides to Bex, because we know Bex is no longer here, but the people in the castle don't know that, so they think Destiny's kinda talking to herself.
It was fun to start with the character who is a ghost from chapter 1. A lot of times in books, you try and keep that going for a long time before you get to that reveal. This one, I wanted the reader to know, like, straight away, Bex has passed. Bex is a ghost who is pretty much her only friend.
Mhm.
And that's kind of sad in its own right, that her only friend is this person who has passed away and who, she needs so much that she conjures her every time she needs her. So there was that as well. There's that aspect of that loneliness.
Right, which is incredibly relatable. And then you also tackle early on that the fact that Bex is rather emaciated, standing in the doorway of Destiny's room. So you're confronting that and making it something that's okay to discuss. I think books allow us to do that sometimes. Sometimes it's hard to have conversations, but a book is a great vehicle to start that conversation.
Totally. And what I love now about even genre fiction, it used to be that you could only explore those themes in like book club fiction or literary
Mhm.
fiction. If you were going to discuss eating disorders or grief or whatever, it had to be in those serious kind of books. And this book has got a lot of serious themes, but it is more of a sort of soap opera. It's kind of a
Yes.
soap opera of a book, but that doesn't mean that you can't tackle those heavy themes in a book because so many of those things are relatable.
Yeah, you mentioned genres. I owe Lori Raider Day a T-shirt that says "Genres be damned," because I think sometimes those genres limit us as readers. That, oh, I don't read fantasy. Not true. Like, pick up this book. You're going to find an incredible cast of characters who just also happen to practice magic or have the ability to
Yeah.
conjure certain spells or do certain things of protection. So I think it's amazing. I wish we would just stop. It's either fiction or nonfiction in my book.
That genres be damned. I do
Yep, you'll
absolutely
you'll
love
get
that.
one
And
too.
it's interesting. Yeah. And there's so much snobbery around it as well, which drives me nuts. Someone who's written in the book club space and someone who's written in the genre fiction space, there's this kind of intellectual snobbery that people are like, oh, I don't read romance or I don't read this. But to me, every genre's got something to teach you about the world. Every genre offers something unique. As a writer, I pick up something from every genre I read, and as a human being in the world, I learn something from every genre I read. And I love that we're now starting to see more genre blends in terms of
Yes.
fiction, where people are like, it's a bit of this, it's a bit of that, it's a bit of that, and so I think it appeals to a wider audience. Certainly with this book, what has been very interesting for me to see, which, well, with my first 3 books, I was never able to really tell who my readership was unless I was doing an event. And at events, you will see who your readers are because it's mostly women of a certain demographic. And so you're like, okay, women are reading my books. But because people email Destiny for clues, I'm sort of lurking in the background of the clues. And this is the first book that I've seen that's been so widely read by men. My
Awesome.
other books were mostly read by women. And so this time I've got about, I say 60% women, 40% men. So
Good
that's
for
the
you.
great thing about the genre blend is that you can reach all new readers who would never have picked up my earlier works because they're like, oh, those are women's books,
Right.
which is frustrating. Men should read all books, not just men's books. But it
Correct.
has been interesting to see a lot more men reading this book.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. It makes me so happy for you, and then hopefully they'll go back and read all your other books because you're such a masterful storyteller. So,
Thank you,
yeah,
Jen.
been a fan forever. Just that one evening and then reading all of your books. This is the things that you learn from books, because of what characters do or don't do. And then
Yeah.
hopefully if we're, I would say, smart enough or open enough to carry those lessons into our own lives.
Totally. And you know what? Like I make my agent's job difficult and I make publicists and publishers' jobs difficult because they want you to stay in your lane. They want to be able to market you as a historical fiction author or a romance author. And so I'm kind of all over the place. And my next book that I'm working on now is back to book club dystopian fiction. It's a serious book again. There's no magical people. It's a dark story. And so, after this again, these poor men what I really like though about men picking up this book is they picked up the book for the puzzles. I know they picked it up for the puzzles, but they've got this simmering feminist agenda under the surface. So they got fed the feminist agenda while they were doing the puzzles, which I'm like, yes, that's a win. And so they'll probably go to my next book and be like, what the hell is this?
No, I think it's great. It's funny. I was just talking to another writer yesterday, and she was telling me about a story that was done on CNN, like a mini documentary called The Feminists in Cell Block Y. Are you familiar with this?
Right.
I was fascinated. I watched, it's like 14 minutes long, but it's essentially like, look, we talking to, his fellow colleagues in prison, and look, we objectify women and we have to be the tough guy with, money and status and fighting. What does that serve us? Like, we really need to be kind to women and not see them as an object. I mean, it was a fascinating look at trying to change the mindset for men to be more sensitive and not so darn tough and posturing,
Right.
I guess, for one another.
Right. It's a toxic masculinity, right? It's unpacking what masculinity means, where the toxic masculinity comes in.
Yeah, there's even a line in here where you talk about women and Destiny questioning how many women have done that, just kind of brushed things off as, I'm probably just imagining it, or it's probably not that big of a deal. And I found that fascinating too, because we do that all the time. Oh, but no, I'm going to make too much of it. And that's how the pendulum swings from here to, can't see, podcast air, to here. It's normally these little, like, teeny tiny things where, like, God, if I say something, I'm going to sound like a jerk. But if you don't say it, then it's like, okay, well, then I can go a little bit further. And next thing you know, you have
Yeah,
this gigantic gap.
it's a slow erosion of self, because I don't think these things happen in one foul swoop unless it's something very traumatic that has happened. But it's like each time as a woman, you don't trust yourself to speak up. Each time you get treated in a disrespectful way without advocating for yourself or other women, there's a slow erosion that comes with that over time. And so, this is where Destiny is reached. It's like, how often do we do this when in fact we know that this is a dangerous situation, or we know this person, there's something wrong with this person or something suspect about them. But, if you think of serial killers who used to, put plaster casts on their hand and ask women to help them pick up things into their vans, they always knew that a woman, even if she felt uncomfortable, would say, yes, okay, fine, because we're programmed to be, to do acts of service. We are programmed to put other people's needs ahead of our own. And so that's like a deep psychological understanding of that. Very few women would say, no, I'm not going to help you. I don't feel comfortable doing it.
Even to the point, like, I think about this, like, when you're a kid and the boys tease you or they pull your hair or whatever, knock your books off the desk, whatever it is, that means they like you. And I'm like, what a mixed message. People who like me don't pull my hair. People who like me don't, like, send my books scattering. But it's that mixed message we get because young men, boys aren't able to kind of articulate feelings. So they do dumb stuff like that.
No.
And we're told, no, it's no big deal. That's
And
just how they are. It's how boys say they like you.
it was awful that we were taught that as young women. It's like,
Yeah.
if he hurts you, he likes you. So what does that teach you? Stay in abusive relationships. And the worse a guy treats you, the more he actually likes you. So I think of back to being a teenager or a young woman, and some guy would say something that was really awful, and we'd be like, oh, it's just because, he's had a difficult childhood, or he doesn't know how to express himself. And so we would constantly give him the benefit of the doubt, when in fact, it's like, when someone tells you who they are, believe them, just believe them. Don't keep coming up with excuses for them.
This book is an incredible story. I mean, just the mystery alone and trying to solve it, and the magic that's woven in, and this ensemble cast of villains, and then at the same time Destiny's arc. But if there isn't, like, a takeaway in terms of, like, knowing who you are and being okay, that there are going to be people out there who like you and love you for who you are. instead of playing to who you think, because Destiny gets to a point where she's like, that's not really who I am, but that's what they kind of want me to be. So there's great takeaways as we're entertained, as we do the choose your own conundrums, which some of us probably do on a daily basis. There's always a conundrum to choose,
Totally.
as well as puzzles. And I know we're pressed for time, so we'll just head to stories and final 5 questions. So Evangeline is very deliberate when she's making decisions, weighing the options. How do you make decisions? Do you weigh the options, or are you rather spontaneous?
It honestly depends on how important the repercussions are. You know, there are times
Makes
that
sense.
I'm very decisive and I just trust my gut and I'm like, that's the way it is. And there's other times that I'll go backwards and forwards for weeks on end. So yeah, I struggle between the two, but generally I am more decisive and trusting of my gut.
It's awesome. In the book, they conduct a summoning charm. If you could do a summoning, what would you summon?
My goodness, that's so interesting. I think at the moment, I would say I would summon through some kind of magic my parents who are in South Africa, who are now nearing their 80s. My mom's got a lot of health issues, and it's very difficult for me to be in Toronto while they are in South Africa, and to not be able to necessarily travel, especially right now when flights are insanely expensive due to fuel costs, etc. So yeah, I'd come up with some kind of, some way to summon my parents, or to make myself go there for visits. I think that would be awesome.
It could be a summonee, I guess, right? One who was summoned.
Yeah. Like a kind of teleportation charm. That's what I would go for.
Absolutely. What book have you always wanted to read and just haven't had a chance to read yet?
Oh my goodness. That's also a good one. I mean, I try and get to most of the books that I want, but with the podcast, it's really, really difficult.
Amen.
I think all the books that I've always wanted to read, it's probably the classics, Jen. Like there will be classics that I haven't gotten to yet, you know?
Crime and Punishment is on my list.
I don't want that. I'm not interested in reading Crime and Punishment, but, like Mrs. Dalloway, there's other things as well that I'm like, oh, I wish I would have had time to read those. So probably those.
Good. What is one thing people would be surprised to know about you?
I mean, some people would be surprised, other people not. I'm obsessed with squirrels. I'm obsessed with raccoons. I spend a lot of time in Toronto in my park downtown feeding squirrels hazelnuts and walnuts. I have now been bitten so many times. The first time I got bitten, I had to Google if I needed a rabies shot or a tetanus shot, and it said that I needed neither. So now I'm much more brave, and it's fine if I get bitten. So I think, yeah, a lot of people find that out and they look at me like I'm a little bit unhinged.
No, not unhinged. It just
Which is
makes me
fine.
think about this book. And so when you all read it, you'll understand. Then the final question, what song?
One of the point of view characters is a raccoon, people.
Yep.
So I leaned into my love of raccoons.
What song is always on a road trip playlist?
Ooh, I love Mr. Brightside by The Killers. Most things by Counting Crows will be on my playlist. I also love Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive. That's like one of my favorite songs. And Alanis Morissette's early angry music, the coming of rage music. I'm like, yep, have that on. Have that. Yeah, Jagged Little Pill. I'll have that on repeat as well. I always say I was born in the wrong era because I like music from the 50s and 60s, which is before I was born. So I have a lot of that. Like I love Dean Martin, who, was big in the 50s. So my playlist is quite eclectic.
Thank you to everybody who's listening. An even bigger thank you to you, Bianca, who's one of my favorite storytellers ever, for joining me today and providing such thoughtful insight into this genius book, A Most Puzzling Murder. Not only does Bianca create the world of Erie Island along with a cast of characters who all have something to gain and are willing to do nearly anything to secure their goal, she encourages us to grow a bit as well. Woven throughout the book are a variety of puzzles to solve along with destiny whip and choices to make in the form of choose your own conundrum. I hope you will go out and buy this book and read it because you will be amazed with the complexity and accessibility of the story. Like so much of life, two opposite things can be true at the same time. And I would encourage you all to pause a moment and sit with Destiny's question, answer it, and then evolve into the answer that makes you your most amazing self. As Destiny wonders why finding your way to truest self and then fully embracing and accepting it is always the most difficult journey of all. This is Story to
Amazing,
Count with Jen Jumba.
Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.